Alfred Adler Graduate School Student Association present Mim Pew talking about Rudolf Dreikurs and a Psychodrama. Hi, Mim.
Hi. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Behavior during 2 weeks period, you can be sure that mother has not extricated herself. That means that while she thinks she is not concerned, the children know very well how she speaks with her mouth closed, how she looks at it, how she's anxious, how she's concerned with it. That is a normal sequence of events. Here it is something different. Here it is really a power struggle, and she has not extricated herself from the power struggle. It means she has really extricated herself.
Okay, so you heard a little bit of Rudolf Dreikurs' voice with his distinct Viennese accent and his enthusiasm about family counseling. And that is really how I first met him. He came to Eugene, Oregon every other summer, and I think it was 1959 when I first met him. And I have 5 children myself, and my oldest child was about 12, and she looked like about 18. And college boys were inviting her out, and I didn't know what to do anymore. Up to that period, I felt like I knew how to be a mother. But suddenly, with this adolescent who looked so grown up, I felt I really needed some more education. And somebody told me that Rudolf Dreikurs was going to be at the University of Oregon, and that people could come and visit his class. I had never heard of him, but I heard that he was very informative about children. And so because of my oldest child, I thought, well, I'm going to go. People said it's okay to sit in. You can just go in and sit down. So I came into this classroom at the university, and here's this man who always in a way looked a little bit like Humpty Dumpty, in that he had a big round tummy and he had really kind of small legs. And he would sit on the table in front of the class and dangle his legs. So he looked a little bit like Humpty Dumpty. But as you could hear from his voice, he was so compelling and so exciting, so interested in everything that he said, and so anxious to teach people about Adlerian psychology, that because of his excitement, it excited everybody in the group. I remember that first day when I came, he said, "How long do you think it would take you to change your mind?" And people were guessing maybe this long, maybe that long, and he had a pencil and he tossed it on the floor and he said, "It takes that long, no longer, to change your mind." Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to institute a new way of raising children, you could change your mind and begin right now. So that was my introduction to him. And my late husband was a pediatrician. And when I told him about meeting this doctor and that he did family counseling in an open forum session, Bill was just shocked. He said, nobody in the medical profession would interview a child with other people listening in. And he was very, he thought it was not correct. But for some reason, he did come with me to the Parent Education Center the following Saturday. And we were just absolutely smitten because he interviewed these little kids and made sense out of what they were saying and understood their behavior. And it was very, very compelling. So that was kind of our introduction. And we became groupies in that we were both very interested and took the classes. And I would like to say that Ray Lowe was the one there in Oregon who invited Dreikurs, and on this little piece of tape that you heard, Dreikurs was actually doing the interview along with Ray Lowe. Ray was the one who taught the classes and invited Dreikurs to come. So it was a great service that he did, because I was just telling the group before we started the video that there was a tremendous group that was trained there in Oregon with Lowe and Dreikurs. Oscar Christensen, who now is in Arizona, is very well known. And many people came out of that group there in Oregon. Great interest began there. And the wonderful part for Bill and I and our family is that Dreikurs became a friend. He was the kind of person that would, now remember he was in his 60s when he's doing this. He would teach at the university, he would have meetings, and then at night he always wanted to do something like play music. He was a wonderful piano player, and he loved to play quartets. And so we knew people around the city, and the meeting place was mostly at my house. I didn't think anything of it then, but remember, I had 5 children, and they came for dinner, other people, and I always served something in the evening. When I look back now, I don't understand how I did that, but I was going to classes during the day. But somehow we figured it all out, and it was really great fun for us as well. We would either have a discussion group in the evening, and the discussion group would be, I didn't have a degree at all then. I had been to nurses training. It would be graduate students and just mothers who were interested, a whole group of people, but he always treated them all as if they were part of the group. He didn't make the distinction, oh, this is a doctoral student, has to have special treatment. That was never the case with him. So we would always have great discussion groups, and then at the end he would sometimes sit down at the piano and say, now I will play personalities. And then he would play a piece on the piano that he just came out of his head, and then he would turn around on the piano bench and say, now, who do you think it was, a man or a woman? And then we would guess from what we heard in the music. And then he would say, it was a man, now who was it? And then we would look around the group and we would guess, and he would always want to know, why did you guess that person, or why did you guess that person? And then eventually we would get the name of who it was. It was absolutely fascinating to watch him. I know Bob Bartholow talks about that too. And when sometimes people would get upset when he played their personality, because he might play a really down mood and then a happy mood and then a lot in between, or a lot of dissonance, or he could, whatever he played, mostly people liked it, but once in a while they got very upset with the way that he depicted him. It was almost like a therapy session. But there was always something going on. If there wasn't a group, he wanted to know, could we play hearts? So he always had something going on, and he absolutely loved food, and I loved to cook. So we were a good match. So my children still talk about it. My third daughter, who was just a little girl then, she was 7 years younger than Barb, so she was 5 and 6 and 7 when she was meeting him. And when Dreikurs was coming for dinner, tea and Rudolf, she would say to the other kids, here comes God again. and they would talk about it. She still talks about, Mom always bought whipped cream for him, but she wouldn't buy whipped cream for us because he liked his coffee mit Schlag. And so I'd get the whipped cream, and he'd have whipped cream in his coffee. And we had a wonderful swimming hole in Oregon that we took T and Rudolf to many times, and he loved it there. And then we cooked outside, and often I would cook like a whole salmon in a wire basket. And he would be by the water for a while, and then he would come. He called me Mim. Mim, how is the fish coming? And he just couldn't stay away from the interest in the food. He just loved it. And I remember one time when we were there at Fall Creek that the same daughter, the third daughter, she was playing with something and accidentally bumped his glasses and made a small crack in the glasses. And she told him she was very sorry, it was an accident and so on. And then after a while, when the children weren't around, he said, I was very impressed with you that you didn't tell her that she had to come and tell me something. You just let her do it on her own without any prodding, and you didn't punish her. You just realized that it was a mistake that anybody could make. So no matter what we were doing, there was always a little counseling or a little feedback or whatever, and everything was all mixed together. These days we have strict boundaries. You know, if you work on a lifestyle in class, and you still do that, that's of course okay. But he would give advice to people. He would counsel somebody, like, I don't mean long time, but let's say somebody in the group was having difficulty. He would say, well, what is it? And then he would make a suggestion right then and there, so it would be like a little therapy on the side. And he did that often with me and with my husband. Sometimes my husband and I would have a disagreement, and he would say, Mim, what do you think? Bill, what do you think? And then he would make a suggestion. And it wouldn't take any more than 7 to 10 minutes. So there was always this counseling, this feedback going on, which I feel badly that we can't have more of that now, because to be learning in class, to get this psychological feedback, to have lifestyle being done all at the same time while having fun and in discussion groups, it really was a fabulous, fabulous opportunity. And we didn't realize it so much at that time, but he totally changed our lives. I mean, we both went into this field. I didn't have an undergraduate degree, and so when I started taking Ray Lowe's classes, I said to Ray, I will take them, but not for credit. And he said, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And I said, well, why not? I know somebody else who's just auditing the course. No, he said, I'm sorry, you can't, I won't let you do that. You'll have to take it for credit. And what I found, so then for the first exam, because all I'd had was nurses training, the first exam in the class, I must have read the Challenge of Parenthood 3 times, memorized it. And so of course I got a good mark on the exam. And then I found out when I went to see Ray, he said, I wanted you to start your education because I know you're going to want to have a degree. So now this is the beginning. You have your first A at the University of Oregon. And that was his plan, which was really very sweet. And when I think of encouragement, I always go back to that example. So Dreikurs was a fabulous person to teach about Adler because he believed in it so strongly. And he believed that it would change people's lives, as indeed it did. So what a privilege it was to be able to study with him in person and have him for a friend and a mentor. And then as Bill and I moved along in studying more things, we went to Chicago sometimes. Bill spent some time in Chicago. Dreikurs would give the opportunity. He would say, come to Chicago and you can follow me around. Whatever I do, you can be with me. And can you imagine, Bill went to the hospital, made rounds with him, to his office, sat in on the sessions, discussed with him. He went to, he saw art therapy for the first time. He saw psychodrama for the first time. And that was Adeline Starr, who worked in Dreikurs' office. And so I'll make a little segue here into psychodrama. We can come back if there's questions about Dreikurs. Bill was really smitten with what Adeline Starr did with psychodrama, and Dreikurs told him at that time and told me later that he felt that psychodrama, along with Adlerian psychology, was absolutely wonderful, and he really loved it. When we had the summer schools, the Rudolf Dreikurs summer schools, which we still have, it's called Akasi now, he loved to have psychodrama there. And if there was ever any problems, I remember one time we traveled to Greece, and it was a very hard trip, and some of the luggage didn't come, and so some of the people were mad, they didn't have their luggage, and Dreikurs said, Mim, let's do a psychodrama about it. He used it as a sort of problem solving and helping people to not feel so terrible about things. So I subsequently went and took some training at the Moreno Institute in New York, in upstate New York. to learn more about psychodrama, and absolutely loved it because it is such a wonderful adjunct to Adlerian psychology to be able to, what is psychodrama? Well, it's, you take an early memory and instead of talking about it, you play it out, you act it out. You pick the characters and you act it out. And instead of just talking about a family constellation, you say, okay, you be my mom, and you be my dad, you be my sister, you be my brother, and then you all take your parts, and then you start talking, and then you move into action, and all of a sudden you have a psychodrama. That's what he loved about it, was that you could make action out of it, because he was such an action person. So it just went with him exactly. So what will I be doing at the Adler Institute? Well, you all will be coming to the class, and we can do people's family constellation, but then we can also do, if there was a memory that was difficult for you, or if there was a time in your life that was difficult for you, that you want to explore further. We don't go into it at the first moment, but we begin to find out who your family was, and kind of like therapy, warm up a little bit, and then eventually get to that memory or that place that was painful and play it out. And what happens in psychodrama, instead of just talking about it, when you go back and you play that you're six, you begin to feel the emotions again. I remember the last time I did psychodrama at the graduate school, somebody said, well, why is she crying? And I said, because she feels it. And then the person who asked the question found when he played the role, he also was crying. So, but that's the beautiful part about psychodrama. You experience the feelings all over again. And that is exactly what Moreno had in mind when he thought up the idea of psychodrama. One of the questions about psychodrama is, how can it benefit people? What happens in a psychodrama? So I will tell you a personal incident. When I went for psychodrama training in New York, the leader, who happened to be Zirka Moreno, who's a genius, asked if there was somebody that had a question about their life. And I'd had a disagreement with my husband before I came, so I said I did. And so I was chosen to be the protagonist, which was fortunate. And she, like the Adlerians, after we talked a while, she went back and she said, what does it remind you of in your childhood? Didn't remind me of anything. And finally she got up to about when I was 17 or 18 years old, and she said, what were you doing then? And I said, I was in nurses training. And so she said, all right, put your first uniform that you wore as a nurse. She pretended that it was on the wall in front of me. And tell me how you feel about that uniform. Well, it was a ugly little blue and white striped uniform with a white collar, but I felt like the Queen of Sheba in that uniform because it meant that I was a nurse, and I just loved it. So then she went on, what happened in there? She realized that something transpired. It was during World War II, and before I graduated from St. Francis School of Nursing, my husband, he was not my husband then, Bill came home from the service and said, let's get married. And so I did, but I left, but I wasn't sure that it was the best idea. But it was just after the war, and lots of people were getting married, so I got married too, with the idea that I would finish in Minneapolis. And instead of finishing, I had a baby. And so when we came to the end of nurses training, Zirka Moreno said, and you didn't graduate? And I said, no. And I began to cry. I just wept my eyes out. And she said to the group that was gathered, she said, we're going to have a graduation for Mim. And she got a chair, and she put me in the chair, and she said, what would you get for graduation? And I said I would get a nurse's hat with a stripe on it, and I would have a pin that showed the school, the name of the school. So she had somebody give a little graduation address, and she gave me my hat, all pretend of course, and the pen, and then she said to me, how do you feel about being a graduate nurse? To this day I get choked up when I think about it. And I said, I just think it's the most wonderful thing in the world. And she said, how do you feel about this chair? It was a rickety little old chair I was sitting on. And I said, I think it is the most beautiful chair I've ever seen, because it all meant that I had finished nurses training. Now the wonderful part about that story is that I'd been going around with this, what we call unfinished business. And after I psychodramatically graduated from nurses training, I never had that feeling again. That's what the emotion does. That's what going through an incident and re-experiencing it can take away the negative or the bad or sad feelings. So it was as if I had really graduated. So it meant a great deal to me. So after that, of course, as you can imagine, I was totally sold on psychodrama. I saw what it could do for me and what it could do for others. So maybe that's enough about psychodrama for now, and we can go back to Rudolf Dreikurs.
Yes, you mentioned that he was playing people's personality on a piano. Did he play yours?
Yes.
Did you recognize it?
Yes, I did. I was very fortunate to have him play mine, and what he did when he depicted my personality, he played me and he said, oh, I forgot something, and then he went to the top keys and diddle 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 diddle, and that was supposed to be my laugh, because he always liked my laugh. I got a big kick out of him, so I laughed a lot around him. So he put the laugh in, and then people knew who it was. They said, oh, it's Mim. And so it was, his music for me was very sweet. It was kind of up and down, a lot of movement, because as I told you, I was doing so many things those days. But it was always harmonious and beautiful. Some people that he played were very dissonant, and lots of heavy, dark chords, and lots of dissonance. And so I was very fortunate to have it played a number of times. It was always fun. And so more about Dreikurs. He was really the foremost pusher and proponent of Adlerian psychology here in the United States. And why did he want to do that? It was so important to him that people learn about raising children. Of course, you know that he was just, the tape that you heard, he was talking to this mother and her child. And he thought that parents could learn to be better parents, so that children could learn to be more respectful and cooperative. And he just believed in it so strongly that he wanted everyone to learn it that could. And one of the things that I did in Oregon was I became a parent study group leader and trained other parents to be parent study group leaders. And so that we could disseminate the information, and then all the people from the parent study groups, or many of them, would come to the open forum family counseling on Saturday morning. And he also taught lifestyle at the same time, and to the people who were graduate students, my husband, some of the other doctors were there too, because he wanted people to understand about their misperceptions. He said you can't change something until you know what it is. And once you know what it is, then you can make a choice. Do you want to continue it or do you not? So he was just excited about having people learn. The other thing that you might enjoy about him is that he was in our house the night that he gave the speech, The Courage to Be Imperfect. And as he was getting ready for the speech, he said, do you have some place where I could go quiet and make some notes? And we said, sure. So he went into our bedroom, and when he came back out, he had a little note card, one little note card, and it had about 5 words on it. Those were his notes. They were just things, you know, like little triggers for him to remember. He liked to tell stories a lot. He was a great storyteller, and those of you who've heard Mozak know Mozak tells a lot of stories. And Dreikurs always had many wonderful stories, some of which he tells in that tape, And the Courage to Be Imperfect. And it was wonderful to watch how he prepared for a major address, because he would have dinner, he would be visiting, and take 5 minutes and make 5 words, and boom, he was ready to go. So it was fabulous to follow him around. So any other questions that you have about him?
Yes. How different is Adlerian psychology here in the United States, because it was initiated by Dreikurs, compared to the original Adlerian psychology in Europe?
Well, actually, right now, Adlerian psychology in Europe is quite different from American. It's much more toward psychoanalysis. It sounds much more Freudian-like than the Adlerians in the United States. We have this international society of people that get together, and more people from the United States are participating these days. But when they talk about it, I've been there and talked to many people who have been there, there's really quite a bit of difference, especially in the psychologists and the psychiatrists and so on, unless they've been to Akasi and they've been trained by some of the United States Adlerians. So it's surprising that they're like that, but I don't know exactly how come it got to be like that, but I'm thinking primarily of Germany and some of the countries around Germany. But I should say something about Akasi, our international Dreikurs Adlerian summer school, because this was Dreikurs' dream, and my late husband was one of the people who helped to formulate the international summer school, along with Aki Yotam and Eric Blumenthal from Switzerland. And now the summer school has been going for many years, and it is run by his daughter, Dr. Eva Dreikurs Ferguson. That's his only daughter, and then he had an older son. And his older son was also a psychologist, but he was quite Freudian. He was not close to his father, while his daughter is very Adlerian and does a wonderful job of running the summer school, which has gotten much larger. But it's nice to hear your accent, because what Dreikurs loved was to have people come from all countries and come together to learn these principles. And the last 2 summers, last summer we were in Holland, and the year before in Switzerland, and both summers we had people from 28 different countries represented. Sometimes there would be only one, like one from China and a couple from Japan, but still 28 countries. And it's absolutely magnificent to see that kind of representation. Sometimes a little problems with the language of the classes, but we work it out. There's usually somebody else that can help them. So this coming together was a dream of his, which those of us who teach there and those who come feel so fortunate to have a part of this really international movement. And I hope that you all will be able to avail yourselves of this opportunity, because it is unforgettable to get together with Adlerians from all over and participate in the classes and the morning addresses, and then share at meal times. It's really a marvelous thing to do. So anything else that you want to know?
Yes, there is a question in our audience.
Well, one of the questions we were talking about is, how did Dreikurs get to know children so well? I mean, you know, children in the challenge and so insightful. How did that come about?
Well, I think it was his own particular talent. Now, Adler also had this talent, and Dreikurs studied with Adler, but he didn't really study with Adler a long time. But he had a real talent for it, and intuition, I think it was. Sometimes Richard Kopp has talked about how Dreikurs could read people or read children. He was very intuitive, and he watched everything. He watched every movement, he watched everything, and then he would make a conclusion. he would see something. Well, I'll give you one example. One day, one of the students was going to interview a woman, and Dreikurs said, "You do the interviewing, and I will sit there and I will just observe." So the woman came in, and her shoulders were kind of bent, and she shuffled to the chair and sat down, and Dreikurs said, "So, how long have you been depressed?" And he went through the whole interview, and the student never said one word. He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to take over like that." But it's an example of how he would see something. He didn't ask her. He knew, and he had that same way with children. He watched their movement. He could see the competition or the cooperation, or, "Oh, you're trying to be like mom," or "This one's like dad," or whatever. He was brilliant. And he was the one who really thought up and taught about the 4 goals of misbehavior. Adler talked about those things, but Dreikurs made it much more clear than Adler had made it.
Those goals of misbehavior, is it only about children, or that can be applied to adults?
No, I mean, we can talk about power struggles in adults, but those 4 goals were meant for children, like children up to 11 or 12, and not more. It doesn't mean that you don't see attention getting, but he meant those for young children, not for the older ones.
Okay. There is another question.
What were some of the key items, the key issues, the key things that Dreikurs really wanted to get across when he brought Adlerian psychology to the United States?
He wanted parents to. One of the things he used to say is, "I want to teach you to not talk so much." He wanted to teach parents to take more action and not, how, "Don't do this, don't do that," He wanted people to learn to be more effective parents, so that children wouldn't feel so competitive, so that children could realize their full potential and not be nagged at as much as many American parents have done and still do. And he just felt so strongly that if children could grow up to be more cooperative and better citizens, and of course my late husband was a pediatrician, so he believed that so strongly as well. And so it was just natural that he and I would move into this field, because we had all these children, and because he was a pediatrician. We believed also very strongly that if we could help children to feel more worthwhile, and parents to feel like they could be better parents, that this would be a tremendous contribution to our society.
What is the most significant change in your parenting style after meeting Dreikurs?
I think to not talk so much. And he used to say this, that the problem with mothers is that you all talk too much. And I remember when Bill was first using these ideas, he would recommend, as a pediatrician, he would recommend to a mother, "Now this next week, I want you all week to have laryngitis," he would say, which means you can't talk out loud. You can only whisper to your child. Because, "Don't do this, no, it's too," So, Bill used various ways in his office to try to get parents to talk less. And so it was just really wonderful teaching. His book still, the examples are old, but when NASAP was here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I think it was 3 years ago, one of the leaders said that Dreikurs' book, The Challenge of Parenthood, which is very old now, is still one of the best parenting books that has been published. And the principles are there, it's just that the examples are pretty old-fashioned. But I think everyone who studies Adlerian psychology realizes what it can do for us and what it can do for children. For me, what did I do less? I talked much less. I allowed children to work things out on their own if they had a dispute, instead of saying, "Now who did that?" It's just like, let them work it out. Give them the possibility of figuring it out for themselves without so much intervention from a parent. And it was really to be respectful of children, to be respectful for everyone, but certainly of children.
And it was a noticeable change. Did you see it right away?
Yes, the first day that I went to class, one of the things that I learned was the tremendous importance of encouragement. So I went home that day and I said, okay, I know what I can do for this 12-year-old girl who looks so grown up. I can encourage her. And I began that very evening to say things to her that were encouraging. And we can all do that for our friends, for children, for everyone. The tremendous power of encouragement. How easy it is to criticize or to judge or to put down rather than to uplift and encourage. And he spent so much time talking about that, and I still believe that with the very core of my being.
Oh, that's very interesting. I would like to go back to our discussion about psychodrama. You mentioned that you choose the traumatic moment to bring the emotions, and why dramatic?
Why dramatic? Well, first of all, I don't bring the emotions. The emotions come when we play out something. It's we all have areas in our lives that that something happened that might have been difficult for us. Often it's in childhood. Mine happened to be a little older, but often it's in childhood. And when we play it out, it's like when we work with lifestyle. When we play it out, we begin to see other possibilities. And one of the things that we do in psychodrama is that we can replay it in a positive sense. Instead of having it end in a difficult place, we can have it end in a place that's more satisfying for the person who's playing the role. So does that make sense to you?
Yes, but I just think about the emotional impact and how difficult. Is it difficult for the person to go through psychodrama, or it comes natural, or
I wouldn't say it's difficult. We go through a process in psychodrama which is called a warm-up. And when we get warmed up to being 6 years old or 8 years old or whatever it is, it's really quite natural. When we talk about it, it sounds artificial. But when we warm up to that age and we're there, as I was telling you, sitting in the chair, graduating, it was as if I was 20 years old again and graduating from St. Francis School of Nursing. And then you're grown up again when you come out of it. But for those few moments, you are that age. And when you replay it, you experience the feelings, and re-experiencing the feelings can help you to decide new things about them. Or you can work it through in a way that's more satisfactory, and then you don't have such negative feelings about it. It's hard to explain. It's much more clear when you see it. When you see the action happening. So I hope that I've made sense to you in describing it.
Absolutely, thank you. Do we have any more questions from our audience? There is another question now.
When you do a psychodrama of a memory of a young child, is that like a 6-year-old? Is that an early recollection that you're playing out?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. Yes, it is an early recollection. We play out an early memory, the way that it happened, and then the person will experience emotions while they're playing it out, because there's emotions in it. And then when that is finished, if they want to do it in a way that is more positive, let's say that the child had a difficult time with their mother, that it was painful, would they like to play it out with a mother that was softer, more understanding? And if they say yes, then we set it up to play it out that way. I remember one time a man that I was doing psychodrama with had really terrible memories about going to school. His mom was very critical. She never talked to him. She was never interested. And so he played all that out. And I was working then with a woman who was very good at playing roles. And so I said, Vonnie, would you please be a kind mother? He said he would like so much to experience that. So he came home from school to this kind mom, and she asked him about school, and she gave him cookies and milk, and she patted his arm, and he just cried. He just sobbed. He said, oh, that's so nice to experience that. I've never had that in my life. So you can bring nurturing to this person who's playing 6 years old. And then the thing that happens is that as he goes forward in life, there is a part of that that's been healed, that feels better because he has received that warmth that he always missed so much. So that's the power of psychodrama.
It is very powerful. Here's another question. There's another question about how you came to Minnesota.
Oh, yes.
And how did you...
I left that out. I forgot about that. Yes, okay. In 1965, we came to Minnesota because Bill decided, and this was all Dreikurs' influence, Bill decided that he was going to be a psychiatrist, and the National Institute of Health offered a money for pediatricians to become a psychiatrist. So that was the golden opportunity. So we came, Bill graduated from here, medical school and internship residency, and there was a school of social work here, and I wanted to finish undergraduate school and go to the School of Social Work, and both of them were here in Minnesota. So we moved, all our whole family, and came to Minnesota and lived in St. Anthony Park, and we thought, okay, we'll lead quiet lives now. We've had so much going on with Dreikurs and Adlerian psychology. Now we'll spend about 3 years just getting educated, raise our children, and just be quiet. Well, there was somebody at the university that I met in the Department of Marriage and Family, and just happened that he was our neighbor. And so he came over, he and his wife came over one night for dinner, and so we told him about Dreikurs, and he said, well, could we invite him to Minnesota? Jerry Newbeck was his name. And Bill said, well, sure, we can ask him if he'd like to come. And so Dreikurs was invited, and he came, and it was the end of our quiet life. He gave this speech at the University of Minnesota, and I think it was on marriage counseling, and people just loved it. And they said, where can we learn more? And so he asked, people asked, where can we learn more about Adlerian psychology? And Dreikurs said, Bill, Mim, what is your telephone number? And so he said, oh yes, I have the perfect contacts for you. You can contact Bill and Mim Pew, and their telephone number is, and you can reach them. And we thought, oh my gosh, we were trying to study, and I was still trying to get through undergraduate school. And Bill was in his residency, and the telephone began to ring. And people wanted to know, well, could we come and learn about lifestyle? Would you do a lifestyle with us? Sometimes husbands and wives. A lot of these people were therapists in town. Would you do a lifestyle? And so we said, oh, okay. So we would have to do it in the evening because we had our classes and stuff during the day. So we had this little house in St. Anthony Park that had a little office, and so we met people there, and it just began. And we didn't begin it with the idea of we're going to start an Adlerian movement in Minnesota. We just were trying to get educated, and it sort of grew because people got excited and wanted to learn more. Dreikurs would be invited back again, and every time he came back, you know, then Bob Wilhite and Bob Bartholow met him. They got all excited. You know, we want more, more, more. And so Bill was really the one. I mean, I'm given credit, but I was really just kind of going along for the ride. Bill was the one who started the Minnesota Society for Adlerian Psychology, and along with the help from the others, of course. And then the Institute began to grow out of that. And it was really Bill that was pushing for those things. So whatever credit I get, I cooked the meals and washed the dishes and was excited about it, but I didn't do any of the formal planning or anything. But so we were the ones that brought it to Minnesota, but we did not come here with the idea of, we're going to bring Adlerian psychology to Minnesota. It just happened. Wherever Dreikurs went, he stirred up excitement. And you know, isn't that interesting when you think how many people can go to a town and stir up that kind of excitement? I mean, who do we know today that can do that? I mean, it was partly the times. It certainly was him, and T too. I mean, T was always with him, and she is not spoken about enough, I think. She was just a wonderful adjunct to him. When he would be teaching, sometimes he would leave a wrong impression, and then she would ask a question from the floor to clear it up, and he would say, "Oh yes, that is my wife. She always helps me clear up things when I leave a misperception." She was magnificent, and she helped students. She would talk with people. She was always a part of everything. She was fun. She was just a lovely, lovely person. I just really loved being with her, and so did he, of course. And so they were a great pair together, and it was such a privilege to be able to know them. And I would often sit with her when he was giving presentations, and she would whisper things to me, and we would write little notes back and forth about, she would say, "It's going really well, don't you think?" "Oh yes, I think it's wonderful." So it was always very, very fun and very exciting. So anything else?
Yes, there's a question about Dreikurs therapy.
Well, could you talk a little bit more about how Dreikurs actually did therapy? How he actually, you know, practiced Adlerian therapy in terms of client?
Yes. Well, he, of course, like most of us, he almost always started out with, what is your issue? You know, why are you coming? Why are you here today? And what is it that you want to know about? And then he didn't work, you know, he was the one who devised really the lifestyle questions. Adler didn't have anything like that. It was Dreikurs who systematized it. But then, of course, as time went on, he worked very quickly, and he wouldn't necessarily go through all the things that you'll find on a lifestyle forum today. But he would always pay very close attention to the family constellation and the parents and all that, what that was like and how the child found his place. So he would often go there. You know, if it was just an hour interview that he was demonstrating, he might do the family constellation. He might ask some questions about a particular part that the person had difficulty with, especially a brother or sister that he was competitive with, and how that worked out. And then he would always do some memories. And then he would talk about the themes that came out of the memories, and he would discuss them with other people in the group. He would say, "Now, what do you get out of this memory? What theme do you get?" And then people would make guesses, and then he would add to it. But again, as I said earlier, he was so intuitive. He picked up everything, the body movement, everything about the person, how they sat, how they spoke. He was a genius in that regard. And sometimes people didn't understand how he could get the information so quickly because he just noticed every single thing about them. So he would, if he did an hour's interview, he would try to come up with a recommendation for the person that would help them. But in his office, he would do more of the regular lifestyle, the more systematic questions. And then regularly in Chicago, when they summarized the lifestyle, they would do double interviews. And Bill and I used to do that when we worked together. One person would gather all the material about the lifestyle. Then the second person would come in and hear the summary of the material while the client is sitting there. And then the two therapists would discuss the early memories. Well, here's what theme that I get out of it. Okay, well, I get that, but I also think there's a little bit more of this. So it was absolutely fascinating to have two people there because it was broader than just one person, and very interesting. So Dreikurs did that a lot in Chicago.
Interesting. But during that interview, when you present information you got from the client, I would think that you lose the emotions as the person is talking about it, or what? It's kind of a second-hand information.
Well, it is, but see, the person is sitting there listening to all of this, and how often do you get to hear your life discussed with two people? It's really very interesting, and the person can talk too. You know, say, no, that's not quite how it was. It was more like this, or either therapist can say, well, what do you think about that? Does this fit for you? It seems to me that I see this. And so they're very much a part of the discussion.
So it's like a discussion group.
It's like a discussion group, except with just one therapist saying, here's what I see. There are two, which just makes it richer. I mean, I wish we could always do that. I wish we could always have double interviews, because I think that the person whose lifestyle it is benefits so much. I think it's so rich. But financially, of course, it's not very possible to do that.
Any other questions? This is a wonderful discussion, but in a wrap-up, do you want to say something to the Adlerian students here in Minnesota?
Yes,
School?
yes. I think you're all so fortunate to be studying Adlerian psychology, because I really think that you'll find, like most of us have, that it changes your life. It changes your relationship with children. You're more respectful of your partners. You're more cooperative at your workplace. It teaches you that there's no value in arguing about things, but rather working them out in conflict resolution, which Dreikurs loved so much. Figure out the basic problem and then work out the conflict. And so I think you'll find that your life will be richer and more harmonious with all that you're studying. So I'm very happy for all of you that you can learn these wonderful ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and for talking in such a details about Dreikurs and your experience.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. It was really my pleasure.
Thank you.